Hello, everybody. Can you hear me? Give me a 5-5 if you can hear me okay. Testing, testing. Copy. Very good. How are you all today? Excellent, Michelle. Excellent, Rhonda. How are you today? I'm still in a little bit of pain, but I'll be right back. Kaylee. Hey. Okay, Rhonda, what happened to your pain? So I had a kidney stone. That was not fun. It was not fun. I'm not looking well, Joy, but I thank you for that. I look horrible. I will be getting better though. I just it was actually I had kind of a double whammy. I got the I had the kidney stone, and then I had a severe bout of sciatica that popped in right about the time that I had to go to the hospital for the urinary tract infection, which is just so much fun. And the last couple of weeks have been just amazingly entertaining. So I'm actually a very healthy person. The only time that I ever had any sort of medical problem was I was 25 years old, and I blew my back out on a squat machine, and I had to have a major surgery on my spine. They went in and they did what they call a laminectomy on L5S1. Other than that, I've been healthy as a horse. Just had some bad luck recently. So I guess when it rains, it pours. I got the kidney stone, then the urinary tract infection, and then the sciatica. So the stone is behind me. That is all done. As many of you saw last week, I was with my friend Amy down in Mississippi, got that procedure done the following day. And now I'm working with a chiropractor here locally here in Southern California. He's helping me. So I will get through this. I always do. So I can get my butt back in the gym and get down to my ideal weight. I still have somebody called it pandemic pounds. I hate using that term because it's not really a pandemic, but it fits. How's everybody else today? Is it cooling down in your parts of the world? You remind me where some of you guys are. You all know I'm in SoCal, but I don't really know where you guys are. I don't remember. What part of Texas, Tiffany, sorry. Central Florida. Is that like Orlando? I mean, I'm guessing somewhere in the central. Orlando's obviously central. North Carolina. Where in North Carolina, Jody? I lived a year in South Boston, Virginia, which is just over the line of actually it's about a 2-hour drive due north of Raleigh, Durham. So I used to go to Raleigh, Durham a lot, and Greensboro. Actually enjoyed that part of the country. I'm not a big East Coast person, but actually enjoyed. I really enjoyed the Outer Banks. Eastern PA. And Tracy, I know where you are. I don't know where you live exactly, but I know the town you're in. Okay. So you're a little bit further, I guess you're a little bit further south. Because I think Charlotte's a little bit further south. So it's Charlotte's without looking at a map, if I remember correctly, Charlotte's not too far from the South Carolina border. Or maybe it's a little bit more central. I don't know. I'm having a brain fart right now. I'm generally pretty good at that kind of stuff. West of Charlotte. Nice. You have to wait for horses, Tracy. I'll just leave it at that. Waiting on Doug here. So I'm not too far off. My memory still serves me well. I actually played a game one time with a friend. They wanted to test me on my geography skills, and I was over the phone, and I just said, well, pick some random place in the world and I'll tell you where it is. And they were trying to trick me up, and I was a couple of them that they got me. One of them that they got me on was Eritrea. I was like, oh, I knew it was Africa, but I didn't exactly know where. It's kind of hard to get me on the geography, though. I'm pretty good. Not a dining room, Gloria. Not a dining room. Anybody in here want to help Gloria as to what my background is? Hello, Rita. There you go, Lauren. So do any of you guys watch my other buddy Dan Radio Style? Does anybody watch him? If you guys don't watch Dan, I highly encourage you to watch him. He's on Rumble. You can find his show on Rumble on I think it's called On the Fringe. He goes by the name Dan Radio Style. So Douglas is here. Gloria, it's the background of Independence Hall. Jody, yes. So sadly, the lady who was making my cases for the lady who was making the cases for the Tomahawks sadly got COVID and died. So I'll just leave it at that. It's been a mess on the back end for me. So I'll just leave it alone. Doug, can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Excellent. I'm just talking to the group. We only have 32 today, but that I'm sure that will pick up. Brenda, I'm feeling well. Thank you for asking. And it's Ron, not Rob. I don't. I'm not upset though.
Ron, Rob, Dick. I usually call him Dick.
Exactly. I've been called so many things. Just don't call me late for dinner. As did you see my shirt today? Can you see this?
No, I can't see it.
Can you see that?
I beat anorexia. Oh, I've seen that one before.
I beat anorexia.
Yeah, I've seen that one before.
I wore that on the plane the other day, and as I was walking through the airport, I had so many people just come up to me, chuckling and like my shirt.
Yeah, I see you're back home in Pennsylvania, Philadelphia.
Back home in Pennsylvania, indeed. Yeah, wearing my Dodger hat for you today because the Dodgers are in the playoffs.
Oh, they are. Oh, I ain't paying attention.
The Angels. Well, see, you don't remember what the playoffs is like. You haven't had the playoffs in forever. But I just want to say thank you for letting us have Albert Pujols. He's been a tremendous boost to our team.
It's funny because yesterday was actually, or this weekend was very bad sports for me the whole weekend long.
I heard, and Brenda, it's okay. I'm giving you a hard time. She called me Rob instead of Ron. And I'm just letting her know that I'm having fun with her. Let me tell you something. If I didn't like you, I wouldn't tease you. You know how the little boys on the playground are when they hit the girls in the arm or whatever. That means they like them.
So you're saying you go around hitting girls in the arm?
I didn't say that. Don't put words in my mouth.
I'm in one of those moods. Yeah, it's funny because last night a woman says, I'm sorry my husband didn't make it to tonight's class, but I'm here. And I said, oh, where's your husband? She says, oh, we've got dog training for the next few weeks. I said, oh, you're finally having them trained, huh? She's like, I'm going to tell him you said that. I said, please do. He has a sense of humor. But it's like she was bothered by it, though. Of course, this is also the woman who believes that Elvis is still alive. So,
well, everybody was asking about my health. I haven't told you. I had everything went fine. I'm still in a little bit of pain, but I'm recouping.
I heard you were okay through Brady. Yes. Brady was my friend first. Now they communicate with each other more than I.
Right.
Right. It's all right.
All good. All good. Brady, man, I'll tell you what.
I'm happy to bring you two lovebirds together.
I tell you, you know what? He and I are going to do some stuff together. We're gonna do some
canvassing, right?
No, we're going to do some YouTube stuff. He's going to go under his name. Okay. Yeah. So
for two guys who like being behind the scenes, you're getting ready to do an awful lot of stuff in front of the camera. Because he used to tell me the same thing you tell me. Oh, I don't want to be up front. I just behind the scenes.
Well, he doesn't want to show his face. He still wants to go with the war hamster.
He needs a very good computer animator then.
Yeah. Well, no, he's just gonna have the just the icon. So, but anyway,
Hi everybody, Mr. Constitution's here.
yes. So today we're going to talk about the progressive era and the fake and phony 16th Amendment and the 17th Amendment.
Don't forget the Federal Reserve.
Well, the Federal Reserve Act. The Federal Reserve Act wasn't a constitutional amendment.
No, but I talk about it when I talk about these amendments because it ties into the whole thing.
It does. It absolutely. Well, the Federal Reserve, basically the 16th and 17th Amendments were passed to essentially aid, to assist the Federal Reserve Act.
Pretty much.
Mm-hmm. I'm a little squirmy today because of my pain. So if I move around a lot, don't take it. I'm not being the restless 4-year-old on a flight. Are we there yet?
Or as us kids used to do on trips to Arkansas when we were kids. Are we still in Texas?
Yeah. Well, I think I know adults that say that. I've said that. Am I still
Texas
in Texas?
Texas is like half the trip, man.
Exactly.
My dad would always complain about Texas because he swore up and down the cops were always pulling him over because he had a California plate. And he was probably right. All right. One last thing before we get started. So I was watching this video the other day, and it's this guy, and he says, hi, I'm from Utah, and I hear all you Californians are wanting to come to Utah and enjoy our freedom here, and that's fine. But here, I want to aid you and show you how to get here. And he gets out a map and he circles Montana, and he says, this is Utah. Go there. The guy from Montana gets on and says, no. He's trying to fool you. I'm going to tell you exactly where Utah is. He pulls up a map and then he circles the Bermuda Triangle. This is Utah. Californians, go there.
Right. So, go to Cuba.
Yeah. So, well, if we went to Cuba, we'd probably, it'd be less.
We have more freedoms in Cuba.
Less liberal there. Yeah. Less communist in Cuba than is in California. All right. Hi, everybody. Douglas V. Gibbs, Mr. Constitution. Had a interesting class this morning in Fallbrook. I wanted to, before we get started here, we don't have the exact places and times set, but for the most part, I've got the days set. I am getting ready to make a tour through the South, and it's because of this show that I got contacted by a few people. I'm recontacting them, trying to set it up. And I'm even having t-shirts made for this. So just for those of you out there. And the plan is that on the 18th, and I still have to get a hold of Scott on this. I haven't talked to him yet. On the 18th, I'm going to be in the Dallas area. The 19th, I will be Hendersonville, Tennessee at the Patriot something brewery. Once again, when I have all the details, I'll get it out in email and put it on the website under the calendar page. On the 20th, Lexington, Kentucky, the 21st, Bentonville, Arkansas, 22nd, Colorado Springs, Colorado. In fact, the person I'm in touch there, she is a retired lieutenant colonel and a professor, I'm assuming at the Air Force Academy. And she's got, and so I was been in touch with her. Matter of fact, we just texted yesterday a little bit because I'm willing to sit down and talk to people. I'm bringing shirts, I'm bringing books. We're going to have little events along this way. It's a way to turn a vacation into a tax write-off.
Now you know Scott's on tour. He's not going to be.
Scott's on tour. Well, that's okay. I got other people in Texas I'd love to go see. But anyway, so the idea is to be somewhere in the southern part of Texas. Originally, we were talking about the Panhandle. Then I started thinking about what certain areas up there can be like, and decided, I want to go a little south. But anyway, what it is originally is my folks just moved to Bella Vista, Arkansas, which is about 20 minutes north of Bentonville, last April. And plus I have friends in Hendersonville, Tennessee, and we wanted to go see the Ark there in Kentucky. And
you're
once
driving
word
there?
got out that I was going to be in the area, everybody says, well, stop by and we'll have a dinner or we'll have an event or what. And it kind of grew from there.
You're driving there?
Yeah, I drive.
Okay, so are we going to have class or are we going to go
That
out?
week, I will. We'll see what we can do.
Okay.
I'm not sure yet. I know all of my in-person classes are canceled for the week, obviously, because I won't be
Sure.
in California. But the online stuff, I'm not sure yet. We'll probably take a break that week. Probably. That's
Okay.
2 weeks away, 3 weeks away, 2 weeks away. So 2 weeks from now. So anyway, all right. So we are on Amendment 16 and 17 in our Constitution. And we're also going to talk about the Federal Reserve. And, you know, it's funny because when I talk about this stuff and I tell people how things are worse, have been worse than they are today. As bad as things are right now, things have been worse. People go, really? Really? Well, yeah, 1913 is a wonderful year to talk about when it comes to worse. In 1913 and the years prior, both parties considered themselves progressive. In other words, both parties were almost identical. You had a handful of people who were what you would consider conservative, fiscally conservative on the Republican side. And you had a handful of Democrats for, the South will rise again reasons that believe that the states did have a certain amount of sovereignty. But other than that, both parties were essentially identical. And when I say identical, I mean, it's incredible because the person who considered himself the first progressive president was Teddy Roosevelt. Teddy Roosevelt was a Republican. So that tells you something right there, right? And so when it comes to that era, we have to understand that both sides, it was the Fabians in Britain, the Fabian socialists, Victorian socialists, sometimes people call them. And the socialism, Marxism got very popular in the States. And so how it wound up happening is here in America, there was this push towards socialism. And one of the first things that happened was there was meetings for a central banking system. We had not had a central banking system since the Bank of the United States and the Second Bank of the United States, which had been basically created under Alexander Hamilton, which was a system of control over the American economy. And it gave away our ability to create our own money to private bankers. If you read in the Constitution, Article 1, Section 8, it says that it is Congress's job to coin money and to regulate the value thereof. What it did is it was designed to separate us from the European banking system. So one of the reasons for the American Revolution, the internationalists of Europe and the bankers of Europe were very upset because America said, no, we're going to be our own entity. We don't want to be a part of the system. We don't want to be tied into your gold. We want our own monetary system. We want to control it. We don't want it to be based on debt, which is what back then, same thing with Federal Reserve today, that money was created when debt was made. And at the beginning of the United States, that was not the case. Understand this Federal Reserve that we now have is not a federal agency. The only federal about the Federal Reserve is the fact that the word federal is in its name. It's not a federal agency. It's actually a privately owned corporation owned by a secret group of international bankers. And it holds a monopoly on the creation of money in the United States. Whenever the U.S. government needs money, it borrows the money from the Federal Reserve. And when you borrow money, what comes with that? Interest. Federal Reserve then does just as fine with the interest. And once again, it's not the first central bank. We've had the Bank of the United States in 1791, created by Alexander Hamilton, and then the Second Bank of the United States after that, which was finally done away with by, fascinatingly enough, Andrew Jackson, who was the father of the Democratic Party. One of the few good things about the guy is he hated the central banking system. So we have this, and Jefferson and Madison described central banking as an engine for speculation, financial manipulation, and corruption. Boy, talk about knowing what they're talking about. And so in order to properly function, a central bank needs a collection of large sums of money from the people to pay off the interest on the money the government borrows. The creation of the income tax provided that opportunity. Now I set the stage. Let's talk about the 16th Amendment. So in order to create, so once this Federal Reserve is in play, to pay the interest, they need a large collection of money, a direct tax. Income tax is a direct tax. Now, we go to our pocket constitution, we go back to Article 1, Section 9 to ask the founders what they thought of direct taxation. Here's what it says. No capitation or other direct tax shall be laid unless in proportional to the census and enumeration herein before directed be taken. In other words, the only direct tax allowed was by the states on the people, and then the states paying it directly to the federal government based on census population. In other words, they paid a percentage of the overall budget based on their percentage of the population. So that was the only direct tax allowed. Otherwise, everything had to be an indirect tax. Indirect tax. In other words, you're paying the state's paying the federal government. So you are not paying the federal government directly. You are not being directly taxed. You are being indirectly taxed. The nice thing about that is with the states, between you and the federal government, is the states would do something like review the budget, review the spending that they were paying for. And if they didn't like it, they wouldn't pay their share, which means when making the budget, the federal government would have to do it in such a way that all 50, or well, not all 50, however many states there were at the time, that all the states would be happy with it. And of course, that number changed throughout history. It went from 13 to 14 and so on and so on. Now we have 50. So if today, the old method where the states were paying the tax, we paid the states paid the federal budget, California's percentage of the total population of the United States is 12%. California would pay 12% of the budget. But all 50 states would have to be happy with what the budget says. They would have to be happy with all the spending. They would have to be willing to accept it. If there was any spending that they didn't like, that state might not pay their share. So federal government had to make sure that the budget was good for everybody, state-wise. What this did is this kept the federal government from spending money unwisely, frivolously, and unconstitutionally. From what I've read, in the late 1800s, prior to the Fabian influence, federal spending was 95% constitutional, 5% unconstitutional. Now it's 85% unconstitutional. The GDP, let me back up again. The federal spending compared to GDP was between 3 and 4%. Now it's like 28% or 25%, something like that. Progressivism was on the rise in the United States around the turn of the 20th century. Americans were concerned about the large national debt that had remained with the United States as a result of the Spanish-American War. This was not the first time that the idea of a tax to pay off war debt and things like that had been tried. In 1862, Abraham Lincoln signed a bill that imposed a 3% tax on incomes between $600 and $10,000 and 5% tax on higher incomes. The bill was amended in 1864 to levy a heavier taxation on higher incomes. The 1862 income tax law was repealed in 1872 because it had been declared unconstitutional in violation of Article 1, Section 9, Clause 4, which I just read to you, of the United States Constitution. But now we have the Spanish-American War debt, and so the Democrats decided, they understand both parties were progressive, but when it came to money, the Democrats were the kings of progressivism. The Republicans were at least a little bit fiscally responsible. And matter of fact, President Taft was very conservative when it came to the money. And when he heard about this creation, this idea of a Federal Reserve, he swore up and down he wouldn't sign it. So when the idea of taxing the people directly came, the Republicans, for the most part, didn't like the idea of quote unquote soaking the rich. So with social unrest rising among the population, the Democrats decided to propose the Bailey Bill with the express hope that the Republicans would reject it. And the theory was that after the Republicans rejected the bill, the Democrats could then point a finger at the Republicans, claiming that, for political purposes, of course, that the Republicans were in cahoots with the corrupt, wealthy corporate types, and that's why they were against a soak the rich tax on the wealthy. then a Republican rejection of the alignment between the Republicans. A Republican rejection would confirm an alignment between the Republicans and the wealthy. And the slogan used by proponents of the Bailey Bill was "Soak the Rich," a direct call to tax people they consider to be profiteers, a class of plutocrats they claim were in collusion with the Republicans. The fiscally conservative Republicans knew that what the progressives were up to, so they launched a counter move. They proposed a constitutional amendment that would impose an income tax on the rich, and when the states refused to ratify the amendment, the Republicans would use that failure to ratify the amendment as proof to the people that through their state legislatures, their states were against it. So therefore, the Republicans would share that because the states are against it, and also be against anything like the Bailey Bill. In turn, that would defeat the Bailey Bill. And how could Congress approve an income tax against the rich through the Bailey Bill after the people in the states rejected a constitutional amendment that would have done the very same thing? 16th Amendment evolved. It became bigger, and suddenly the proponents of the 16th Amendment, people who wanted a tax on the rich, they got it. It wound up ratified. Now, technically, it wasn't ratified. 2 states broke their own rules for ratification. It was short 2 ratification votes. But don't worry.
Well, it was declared ratified by Knox, so it was ratified.
Yeah, but Philander Knox. He deemed it ratified.
He deemed it ratified. So, hey, it's ratified.
Well, yeah, and I'm wondering if he was related to Pelosi in any way, deeming things like that. But now, they promised, though, once it was ratified, don't worry, this income tax will only be imposed on the top 5% wage earners. Right. Everybody else has nothing to worry about, and it's going to be voluntary and temporary. We just want to pay off this debt. Once this debt from the war is gone, we'll get rid of it. Yeah, like government gets rid of things, they do like that. So a lot of things came into being right around Federal Reserve and 16th Amendment. Oh yeah. So the progressives, satisfied that the 16th Amendment had been ratified, hoped to use it to tax the rich. And in the beginning, only 5% of people were required to submit tax returns. And many of the rich, however, avoided the tax with charitable donations and deductions and other creative strategies. Matter of fact, the nonprofit, well, that's what it was created for, is to get people like Rockefeller and so on and so forth out of having to pay this tax.
What I would like to know is that why did some of those foundations apply for tax-free status before we even had taxes?
That's a good question, because that was happening.
Right.
They saw it coming.
Well,
during World War II, Franklin Delano Roosevelt saw that the income tax, that he realized that the federal government, even when taxing the rich, didn't have enough money to fund what it needed to fund. And he wanted to vastly increase revenue. And so he initiated a policy of withholding all wages and salaries, not just the highest incomes enjoyed by the rich. So rather than the rich paying the tax at the end of the year, the tax was collected at the payroll window before it was even due to be paid by the taxpayer. The style of collection shifted the tax from its original design as a tax on the wealthy to a tax on the masses, mostly on the middle class.
And I think today we call that withholding.
W-2 withholding. And now the states voluntarily participated. There's nothing in the Constitution, there's nothing in federal law that actually requires W-2 withholding. That is actually a state decision. The states made that decision. And I'm waiting for the first state to say, you know what, I'm going to outlaw W-2 withholding because I'm tired of the federal government taking all of our money beforehand and then giving us back crumbs.
Maybe you should give DeSantis an idea.
Might be a good idea. Actually, right now I'm working on something to meet with the Arizona Attorney General.
Nice.
So, matter of fact, today, after mentioning I wanted to do that, someone from my Constitution class said he would fund the trip under one condition, and I said, okay, what's the condition? He says, I get to go. Mr. Funder, you're there, but I'm driving. But anyway. Hey, there's always good stuff going on, and one of the things that, and I'm sorry to take this rabbit trail, this came to my mind, and this is something I was telling the class this morning. One of the things that holds back a lot of my efforts is lack of funding. For example, when it comes to this Kamala Harris case, somehow we have stayed afloat on it. But the funding has come in very small, and it's been just enough. Just enough. The Constitution Association's balance is lower than what most people have in their bank account right now, even after payday. And so funding is always an important thing. So if anybody wants to donate, buy books, whatever, trust me, it helps immensely. But anyway, not that I'm trying to, hey, and if you act now, we will act. No, I'm not doing that. But you know what I mean. Unfortunately, funding is a large part of what we do. All right. Now, that all said, so in addition to violating the original intent of Article 1, Section 9, prohibiting direct taxation, the income tax also opposes the Fourth Amendment, which requires that a citizen's papers, all that be protected. And the IRS, of course, can violate the privacy of the home, business, personal papers, personal affairs of the private citizen without due process. Because the tax is based on income, the IRS has the task of making sure everyone pays his fair share. Of course, the task is physically impossible without prying into the private papers, private business, personal affairs of individual citizens. Since the ratification of the 16th Amendment, there have been questions about whether the proper number of state ratification votes were ever achieved. I mentioned that early on. Despite the argument by some researchers that the 16th Amendment was never properly ratified by the requisite 3/4 of states, and that the politicians, they were aware of the discrepancy, and that Secretary of State Philander Knox fraudulently declared ratification, the fact is that later on, other states did wind up ratifying it. So even though it wasn't ratified properly at the time, it did eventually get properly ratified. All right, so that's that. Now we get back to the Federal Reserve. So now we have a mechanism to pay for the Federal Reserve, or at least the interest. Borrow money, income tax pays the taxes. But the problem is administering all this stuff. The states, for the most part, have had a problem with a lot of stuff. State legislatures have always posed as an obstacle. So we also need to get the states under control. And the problem is the states use the U.S. Senate as an oversight over the lawmaking process, the treaty process, and the nomination process of the federal government, because the state legislatures were appointing the U.S. senators. The U.S. senators, in turn, was a voice of the states. It was a way the states could use the Senate as oversight over the federal government. So
it's also a whole lot easier.
We've got to get control of the Senate. We've got to let the big bankers and the big wealthy people and the powerful people have more control. But how do you convince everybody that the 17th Amendment is needed so that you have more control? You claim that the way it is right now, that the wealthy and the corporations who are actually pushing for this have a lot of control because of the way it is. And so we're going to get rid of corruption. In other words, you say that its existence is causing what you're actually trying to accomplish.
It's called the Hegelian dialectic, problem, reaction, solution.
You got it.
Well, it's not actually problem, reaction, solution, but that's the layman's way of saying it.
Well, the founding fathers put checks and balances in our system to make us a republic.
100%.
In a democracy, in a pure democracy where the people have all the power, 51% can vote away the rights of the other 49%. So people get really upset with me of the 17th Amendment and say, well, gosh, what about the will of the people? The will of the people's fine, and the will of the people's voice is in the House. But we don't want the will of the people to have the only voice. We want, get back in a democracy. Let's say full democracy, we make the decisions. What if then the people decide, you know what? We want to outlaw certain groups from having businesses. And because a certain group's having a certain privilege, we're going to outlaw them from having access to certain things. We're just going to vote for it. And since the big cities control everything because they have most of the population, those laws are going to go into place in a pure democracy. How long before everything tumbles and falls apart, collapses in a fiery death of civil war and discontent and anarchy? How long? So we have mechanisms in place to be a republic, checks and balances. And these checks and balances are largely, not completely, but largely allowing the states to have oversight, because the states through their delegates created this Frankenstein monster called the federal government, and they don't trust it. So we want oversight over everything it does. So by appointing the U.S. senators, it is a way that the states can be involved with and approve of the lawmaking process and treaties and appointments. By handling the the budget like they did before, it was the states legislature's way of making sure that they had oversight over how the federal government was spending its money. When it comes to amendments, it takes 3/4 of the states to ratify an amendment. Even if the president decides to wage war, it still takes Congress. It's still necessary for Congress to pay for that. And guess what? If the states have their voice in the Senate, that means also the states have a voice in whether or not the president can continue waging war. So our republic was set up so that the state legislatures pretty much had an approval mechanism on everything the federal government did, especially everything that the president did. Those have gone away. And the 17th Amendment is a large part of it. So to comprehend the 17th Amendment, we need to go back in history and understand how our original system was made. And I talked about checks and balances, but also something else that was there: separation of powers. Separation of powers has the separation not only of the three branches. The legislature has its own powers, the president has his own powers, the judges have their own powers, but also between the different levels of government. The federal government has its own authorities, the states have different authorities.
And the people have authority.
People have their own authority, cities have their own authority, and so on and so forth.
But the states lost their authority with the 17th Amendment.
Absolutely. So the dynamics of the federal government was set up to prevent any part of government from having access to too much power. Too much power in any one part of the system can be dangerous. And this includes too much power in the hands of the people or too much power in the hands of the federal government or whatever. So the general population, let me back up. I keep trying to get ahead of myself. So the senators were appointed by their state legislatures. The state legislators are voted into office by the people of the state, at least in the House. The state Senate was different, but that's a whole different discussion for a different time. And the and then the U.S. senators got their spot because of the appointment, the vote of the people in state legislatures. So we indirectly voted for our U.S. senators. We voted in the people into our state legislature, who then appointed the U.S. senators. And the people are also represented indirectly in that manner. Remember something. When it comes to people's voice in the federal government, people say, yeah, but we should have more voice. Was the federal government there to get into your lives? No, it's there to do the things that needs to be done for a central government so that the states, the governments don't have to worry about it. So who's the president really the president of? Is he the president of the people or the president of state legislatures? He's the president of union and state legislatures. You don't want him involved in your life. So state legislature's voice being involved in this makes it very important. So the Senate functioned in a different manner when the senators were appointed by the by the states, because they were expected to abide by the wishes of the state legislatures. The senators were expected to be not only have their state's interest in mind, but how to protect the states from foreign entrance and foreign infiltration. Federal government, in order to not become a potential tyranny, had the voice of the states in the Senate as oversight to make sure the federal government didn't go in that direction. In other words, the federal government exists because the states allow it to. Or as that Arizona AG I mentioned not too long ago said, the states created the federal government, not the other way around. The powers derived by the federal government were granted to it by the states. So in a way, the states birthed the federal government, making the states the parents of the government, the federal government. The federal government is not supposed to be able to just do much of anything without permission of the several states. The Senate is the representation of the states, or at least was prior to the 17th Amendment, so that the states could ensure that the federal government remained within its authorities. So now we got the 17th Amendment, and it changes everything, doesn't it? Just suddenly now, treaties, the states have no voice in it. Both houses are voices of the people. Why have two separate houses if they're both going to be the same because they're both voted in by the people? Why have a bicameral Congress if both houses are exactly the same? One of the purposes of having a bicameral Congress, in other words, two houses, is that the houses are different from each other. It's like having a mom and a dad.
Don't go there.
Oh, I will.
Don't go there.
When dad says, hey, this is what I think, mom says, well, I'm not so sure. She didn't just every time go, yep, whatever your father says. Yep, whatever. No, trust me, especially if they're my wife, there's a bone of contention there. And that's good.
I thought you were going to go somewhere else.
That's oh, you mean like Adam and Steve?
I was like, don't go there.
Well, you kept goading me to.
Yes, I did.
But yeah, no, God created mom and dad, different parents on purpose. That different way of looking at things makes the family run better. Just like with Congress, you want the two houses to be different. It makes everything run better because the House may say, hey, this is a good idea. And the state says, wait a second, not from my perspective. I'm not sure it's so good for the states. And then the Senate might say, you know what, this is the way we want it. And the House says, wait a second. That might be good for the states, but what about the people?
You know, you talk about removing the state's influence. I mean, I think it's a little bit deeper than that, because if you have the people voting on it, it's a whole lot easier to rig an election. So you can ensure that the person that you want gets in.
Well, it's not just that, but hey, tell you what, you put me in and you approve of what I do, and I'll make sure you get a gift from the Treasury.
Mm-hmm.
I'll give you that $1,600 or whatever it may be. You know, food stamps are up 25% in the last couple months. All this stuff. But what happens when people get a bunch of gifts? They stop taking care of themselves. Little side note. So my wife and I, Friday night, we said we're going to go out to eat. Because of the lingering effects of COVID, half the restaurants still closed at 8 o'clock or before. Didn't used to be that way. So half the restaurants are already off the table because my wife gets home right before 8 o'clock. So we got to go someplace that's open past 8. The places that are open past 8, there's an hour to an hour and a half waiting list. Why? Because are they that busy? Are the places packed? No, there's empty tables all over the place. They don't have the staffing. Unemployment rate's up, but restaurants have an hour and a half wait because they have only a quarter full restaurant, but they don't have the staff to handle all the people. So there's an hour to an hour and a half wait. We wound up going to Denny's. But my point is, that's what happens. When you give and give and give to people, they stop producing. And when they stop producing, staffing goes down and the likelihood of empty shelves goes up.
Well, if that's, free education sounds all well and good until you realize the free education is just another mechanism to keep people stupid, because if it's free, then nobody's going to try.
Well, it's not just that, but also, see, it used to be that, man, if I had a bachelor's degree, I can really make some good money. Mm-hmm. The problem is now everybody has a bachelor's degree, and there's more bachelor's degrees than jobs that need bachelor's degrees. So what has happened with a bachelor's degree?
Well, and a big reason for that is because they shipped all the jobs overseas. So you don't,
part of it is that, and a part of it is that there's just so many people has one, and the quality of the people has gone down. Yeah, there's just so many factors. But anyway, get back to what we were talking about. So we have a bill approved by both the people in the states before it went to the president for law, and the people had a voice and the states had a voice. They both approved before it went to the president. Now, because the senators are in there by the direct vote of the people, when a law goes into play at the federal level, the states are required to follow it, even though they had nothing to do with passing it. Think about that for a second. Now, what it does is it makes us more like a democracy. The damage caused by the ratification of the 17th Amendment was that state representation in the Congress was removed. Senators, after the ratification of the 17th Amendment, would be voted into office by the vote of the people, making the U.S. Senate more like the House of Representatives, eliminating a very important check and balance. The fact that they're different, that states had a natural check against people, the people had a natural check against states because they were different from each other. And it's made us more like a democracy and less like the republic the founders originally intended. The people were fooled by a relenting rallying cry of, well, yeah, but the will of the people, the will of the people, the will of the people. And, you know, it's corrupt. Those state legislatures are appointing all these, it's corrupt. The corporations are convincing them who to appoint. So we became more democratic. And just as the progressive desired, the American form of government moved closer to a democracy with the 17th Amendment. And by the way, Karl Marx said, democracy is the road to socialism. So progressivism was on the rise in the United States during those early years of the 20th century, and it couldn't get any worse. People are like, we're ready for a civil war here. Sound familiar? You have the Federal Reserve, the 16th Amendment, 17th Amendment, and both parties are progressive. You think it's bad now. And the statists didn't review their true intentions. If they had proclaimed that they desired the 17th Amendment for the reasons they did, for more control, and so that they could proceed in their quest to change the United States into a socialist system, the people would have rejected it. But they used a populist argument. It is for the will of the people, and plus, we're trying to stamp out corruption. Oh, in that case, we're all for it. You deserve a Senate voted into office by the democratic will of the people, because your voice matters so much. And if you directly vote for your senators, well, they'll be more apt to act in line with the will of the people. And they bought that horse shit. And they said, well, and that's the same argument now where are people arguing that it should be no more than 30,000 people per representative in Congress. That would make the House of Representatives thousands of representatives. But don't worry, it'll be a smaller group that they represent. They'll be more answerable to the people. Really? Then how do you explain city council members? The whole American political system has been turned on its head. The entire dynamic of our whole government system, as it was originally intended to function, has changed. The damage to the American form of government has reached deeper into the dynamics of our constitutional republic than immediately meets the eye. The fact that we have removed the oversight of the state legislatures from the federal government means that the federal government can act as it wants, regardless of what you say. Who's going to stop them? The states? They don't have a voice anymore. You? Well, we'll just arrest you and put you in the clink and claim you're an insurrectionist because you showed up on Washington, D.C. on January 6th. Or as Biden once said not too long ago, well, we've got F-35s and nuclear bombs. I'm not worried about an insurrection of the people. If a president of the United States signs a treaty, before the treaty goes into force, it must be ratified by the U.S. Senate, which back then was the voice of states. Now it's just a bunch of ideological knuckleheads that are voted in because they fooled the people into voting them in. So that protective mechanism against bad treaties is also gone. We hear about these, well, they got this treaty where they want to take away our gun rights. This treaty does this treaty. Well, now suddenly treaties become very dangerous because the states aren't there to stop it. The senators being appointed by the state legislatures was a protective mechanism against the president who might make treaties that were dangerous to state sovereignty. It was also a protective mechanism against him appointing judges that might be dangerous to the welfare of the states. It was a protective mechanism to make sure that the states could follow all creation of law at the federal level to ensure that it wasn't unconstitutional, wasn't tyrannical. 17th Amendment protected us from all of that. Or I'm sorry, the before the 17th Amendment. 17th Amendment took that away. 17th Amendment destroyed all of that. The safeguards that were in place have been removed by the 17th Amendment.
Well, the 17th Amendment essentially took away the constituency of the
Of the
state,
states. Mhm.
of the states and or their participation at the federal government level.
You
The
got it.
very system that the states created, they were essentially taken. That'd be like your mom and dad having control, or you making buying a house and having a family, and then the kids get to make all the rules, and the parents have no say, but they still
And then the kids go to the court, say they want to divorce their parents, but they get the house, and the parents are out on their heels.
right.
And then the court giving in and doing it.
Mhm.
But guess what? The parents still have to pay the bill.
Exactly.
bills.
That's what I was just saying. The parents still have to pay the mortgage. Although in that particular case, I don't think that really applies because the states haven't paid for anything since the Federal Reserve Act.
Absolutely, they are.
Well, the states are paying.
They're paying that because we're paying it. Instead, our money's going straight to the federal government instead of through our states.
Do the states still pay money into the federal government? Because my understanding
Yes,
is that,
and no. There's money. It still goes from the states, but then the states get excited when money comes back. But all that money is going to the federal government through income tax is supposed to go to the state. See, here's the thing. For example, in the Constitution, there is no authority for the federal government to fund highway systems because the states are supposed to pay for the roadways, but they can't afford the roadways. Why? Because all their money is going to the federal government. But don't worry, the federal government will give them some of that money back so they can pay for the roadways. See the problem?
Mhm.
Quit having the people give the money directly to the federal government. Let the states take care of the roadways. And then when the federal government has expenses that come up that's not inside the states, but has to do with federal government authorities, then let the states give them some money. But what happens now is because the federal government's giving the money back to the states, that should have been the states in the first place, to pay for the roadways that the states should have been taking care of themselves. Then the federal government says, oh, by the way, you're going to do what we tell you. If you don't, we're not going to give you your money for the roadways.
Well, that's basically what the federal government has been assuming control over everything, starting with the 17th Amendment. So and the Federal Reserve Act. But by doing the Department of Education, they control education, and they if you get your federal money so that you teach what the federal curriculum is, and if you don't go by that, then the school is going to have to fund itself, or you're going to have to get state money or whatever. But it's never enough money to pay for the states. The schools grossly overspend because they have the state money, and that's the whole thing about. Well, if you have a budget of let's theoretically say $100,000, you have to spend all $100,000 of it, even if you're conservative, even if you're like frugal and you only spend 50,000. Well, at the very tail end, you have to spend that 50,000 that's left over on the balance sheets, because if you don't, then the next year your budget will be cut. So, I mean, it's a fraud all the way around. And if you listen to, I want to say it was Robert Welch. He was Robert Welch. I think was on the it was the John Birch Society back.
Yeah, he used to be president of the John Birch Society.
Right.
Some would even say he's the creator.
And he talked about how one of the things he talked about in terms of one of the 10-step program that they were doing to destroy the United States was do cost overruns and just spend money at will. And that's what they've been.
Who's going to stop them?
Nobody.
Because the states can't stop them anymore. States used to stop them.
Right.
Now there's nobody there to stop them.
Correct.
And on top of that, the legislature, which is supposed to be the voice of the people in states, has become the weakest of the three branches rather than the strongest. Now the judges control everything.
Right. I mean, the whole thing is ass backwards, and there's a few people in the comments are saying that the whole thing just needs to be taken down, and I don't completely disagree with that. I think I think the whole thing needs to be taken down in its existing state and then reinstituted in the state that it was supposed to exist from the beginning.
My class last night, my class this morning, one of the things we talked about, people always ask me, well, how do we fix this? And I got two things that I tell people. Number one, everything starts locally. You complain about the cockroaches of Washington, but we breed them locally. Stop breeding them locally. You can control your state, your city councils. You can control your counties. You can control your counties. You can control your states. control your states, you're going to get control of the federal government. The other mechanisms is let's repeal the 17th Amendment and let's reverse Reynolds v. Sims. Reynolds v. Sims, 1964 case. What that was, for the audience there, I think I've talked to you about Reynolds v. Sims before, right? Okay, let me explain.
I'm not sure.
All right, well, this is good because this is,
doesn't sound
you
familiar.
want to know how we get back to where we need to be?
Mm.
Here's how we do it. First, we got to repeal the 17th Amendment. Now, I'm going to tell you right now, for all you out there that think that Convention of States / Article 5 Convention is a danger, let me ask you a question. Will Congress ever propose an amendment repealing the 17th Amendment?
No.
Absolutely not. So if it's going to be done, it has to be done through a convention that the states run. Number one. So let's say we get the 17th Amendment reversed. And someone says, yeah, but what does it matter, Doug? Because we got a liberal legislature up there in Sacramento. They're still going to put two liberals in the Senate anyway. So what's the difference? So that's where 1964's Reynolds v. Sims also needs to be reversed. See, prior to the 17th Amendment, the state senates are also modeled after the U.S. Senate. But instead of 2%, excuse me, in the U.S. Senate was 2 per state. At the state Senate level was 1 per county.
1 per county, right?
You got 1 per county, and they're appointed by the county
By
supervisor
the county supervisors, right? Mhm.
rather than being voted in.
we have talked about this. I just didn't recognize.
That's okay.
We've talked about the what you're about to talk about, but I didn't recognize the court case that was associated with it.
Yeah, that's okay. That's why I'm here for you, brother.
No, you and your Dr. Pepper.
Well, you don't think Mr. Constitution's able to operate without a doctor in the house, do you? Anyway, all right. So here we've got Reynolds v. Sims. What happened was all the states used to have 1 per county, state senators appointed by the county supervisors. After the 17th Amendment, some of the states decided to also change how they did their state senate and change them over from being appointed by the counties to being voted in by the people. But if they're going to be voted in by the people, they also decided that it should be like their assemblies where the districts are evenly distributed by population. So each district has about the same amount of people, because, for the sake of democracy.
Mm.
And a lot of the states didn't follow that old, that new method. One of them that did not follow the new method was Alabama. So Sims, who was, I can't remember, I think he was Secretary of State for Alabama, was sued by Reynolds saying, you know what, it's not very democratic what you're doing, you need to change it. Goes all the way up to Supreme Court, Warren Court. Me saying the Warren Court for some people, that answers everything they need to know right there.
Amen to that.
The Warren Court says the states are no longer allowed to do it 1 per county and based on appointment by counties because it's not very democratic. All states have to now create state Senate districts that are evenly distributed by population. Now, what has happened as a result in California, for example, up in the far northwest of the state, there are some rural counties, and 8 rural counties up there comprise Senate District 2. All 8 of those counties get 1 senator for their Senate district. Meanwhile, the county of Los Angeles, 1 county, has 13 Senate districts in it because of population. So in other words, in rural areas, you have 1 senator for 8 counties, but in the cities, you have 13 senators for 1 county. Now, if we were to go back, not even with the appointment part, just the part where it's 1 per county, do you think that the state Senate in California would look differently? Absolutely. If you've ever looked at an election map by county in California, it looks like the Republican wins overwhelmingly every time.
Amen.
There are more red counties than blue counties. And so the state Senate would be Republican. The assembly would still be Democrat. But what would happen now is we have split houses.
Maybe.
Yeah, it probably wouldn't change anything. People still keep voting like
I think it would be more even than, but I don't think it would be super. I don't think it would be hard.
No, it doesn't matter because you have now a Senate that's the opposite. So now there's debate.
Well, let me ask you this: going back into the 60s and 70s, was the California state legislature always Democrat?
No, but I'm talking about the current situations. And yes, I know that there's fraud and I believe it's a red state.
The
But
reason
I'm just
no,
saying, changing
I'm-
nothing other than
Okay. All right.
one per county appointed by the county supervisors. Likelihood would be that the assembly would be blue and the state senate would be red. Now you have disparity between the two houses. Now there's going to be debate. Now there's going to, one side's not going to run away with everything like they are right now. And if the 17th Amendment's gone and the senators are not being voted in by the people, they're being appointed by the state legislature, you're also going to have them having a compromise because you have one Republican House, you have one Democrat House. So the US senators from California would not be two Democrats, it would be one Republican, one Democrat. And we're not the only state that would happen in. New York and Illinois comes to mind, among others.
Mhm.
And I did a little calculation, looked at different states and how many of them would change. And by my calculations, I'm not saying this is exactly right, but I think it's pretty close. If you reverse the 17th Amendment and you reverse Reynolds v. Sims and went back to the old style, the US Senate would have 76 Republicans in it.
Wow.
Now, if the US Senate has 76 Republicans in it and all the blue states have split legislatures, do you think everything else would start falling into place?
Well, that's again.
Well, considering if the Republicans behave, yes.
Well, no, you need to have accountable leadership and accountable people in and responsible people there.
And if those responsible people are there, and now the Republicans have more control, first of all, you're probably going to see some of the legislatures also go even redder because now suddenly election integrity is taken seriously.
Yes.
Right. See what I'm saying? So all the other things start to fall into place.
Well,
That's my
okay.
point.
Now let me. I don't want to get too far ahead, but we're getting short on time here. I want to ask you. You know, talking about repealing the 17th Amendment only. So I'm of the opinion that we need to repeal many amendments after the 12th, and I actually think that we need to repeal the 14th Amendment as well.
No, I don't think we need to repeal the 17th Amendment, 14th Amendment. I mean, we need to follow it as it was written.
Okay.
The problem is it's been interpreted in ways that's not proper. If we followed it as it was written, it would be fine.
Okay. All right. I'll see that point. Let me ask you the question about. I'm gonna have a little fun here. Maybe it'll be a little controversial.
Okay.
What is your take on voting? Having having owned property to vote, or having or paying taxes to vote, so that people who are leeching off the system do not have a say in the government.
I believe that's the way we should go. Absolutely.
Okay.
And let me ask you this then, because you know the answer to this. My opinion is voting a right or a privilege?
I believe it's a privilege.
It's a privilege of citizenship. It's not only a privilege of citizenship, it was a privilege. In the beginning, there was a reason why only certain people could vote. It's a privilege. I mean, in fact, Bushrod Washington, who was a federal judge, member of the Supreme Court, and by the way, the nephew of George Washington, Bushrod Washington wrote a book about rights and privileges, and he listed voting under privilege. I know it says it's a right like 5 times the Constitution in the later amendments, not the ones by the founders. But I believe it to be a privilege. And if it is a privilege, and it should be a privilege that should be only to people who it's going to directly influence, should it not then be only those who pay taxes? Those who are leeching off the system shouldn't have a voice in the government because all they're doing is taking.
Correct.
In other words, only the producers, in my opinion, should vote. That's just me.
I agree.
That's the reason why originally the states, when it was left up to states, they said only property owners could vote. Property owners tended to be those who were successful, those who had businesses or farms, and they were paying property taxes. They were paying taxes. There was no income tax.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're going to pay tax, you're paying a property tax, and those were property owners. So the only people really had skin in the game tax-wise were property owners, and that's why property owners are the only ones allowed to vote. Someone says, yeah, but that's just the way to make sure the women and blacks couldn't vote. No, there were plenty of women and blacks that voted. It just wasn't very many of them because very few of them actually own property.
I know, Doug, in the past, you've told me that you aren't in favor of women voting.
That's not what I said. I said that when women started voting and their emotions got involved, it started screwing
Guys,
everything up.
I'm totally throwing him under the bus there.
Yeah.
He did not say that. I wanted to see the
No,
look on his
I
face.
joke with, well,
He
the
froze
thing is,
for a
I joke with
second.
my wife about that. I joke with my wife about that. Sometimes she'll give up an opinion, and I will joke with her and say, and that's why back during the Revolutionary War, people like you weren't voting. What do you mean, people like me? You mean females? No, I mean people who have opinions like yours. Yeah, you mean females.
I just,
It's funny because
I wanted to see how you handled that.
No, I gotta answer. I gotta say this. I know women who say women shouldn't vote because women tend to think with their emotions and all this other stuff. Now that said, it's because they're nurturers, and the
Absolutely.
politicians play on it.
Yes.
So it's not really the women's fault. It's the fact that the politicians are playing on their natural nurturing tendencies. How did I get out of that one?
Here's an interesting question. Going along with the property. So I think Tracy's misunderstanding this, but what she's asking, she says, if you own multiple properties, you could vote multiple times.
No,
No,
you just have to be a property owner
yeah,
in order
if
to
you
vote.
own
Period.
whether you own one or
Right.
100,
Right.
it was just the whole point, Tracy, is that if you are a property owner, you are paying taxes into the system, and therefore you should have you have a say of how the money gets
You
spent.
have skin in the game.
You have skin in the game. By voting people into political office who are going to essentially be spending money, you have the ability to have a say of who gets to go spend the money that you pay taxes to or with. Anyway.
Yeah, we'll talk about women voting actually next week because it's the 19th Amendment.
Yeah.
Is next week. So you want to talk about women voting? We'll really get my opinion next week with the 19th Amendment. And now those of you who think that I am a horrible person, I will redeem myself next week.
Now, Tracy, you know that I didn't know that because I can't tell. I can't tell if you're joking in the text. She said she was joking about the owning multiple properties and voting multiple times.
Oh, you thought she thought
I thought she was serious. Yeah,
Man, some
I
people
can't. No way for me to tell. I apologize.
Yeah, well, see, you have not been able
Tracy's
to
actually
control your mind reading capabilities.
Tracy's actually a neighbor of ours. She lives in a horse town north of where we used to have where we had our.
All right, yeah. In other words, a town where on 6th Street the
Exactly.
center line is red, white, and blue.
Exactly.
You don't get much more conservative than that town.
Absolutely.
By the way, when I was in high school, they were the crosstown rivals. I went to
Nice.
Corona High.
So, all right, guys, it's 4:00, and we.
Yeah, I got a class in San Juan Capistrano to get to, and tonight I'm taking my wife with me. It's a shock. But she's going for the food. She heard it's a
Okay.
good restaurant.
Well,
that we're having class at.
hopefully, you won't have any snowflakes that get offended when you guys do the national the.
You know, we've it's not only been good, but a couple of the waitresses are sitting in now and becoming students.
Very nice.
The bartender listens from over the wall. He told me because he listens too because I could be heard over there.
Nice.
It's funny because this location really works out well. All
Perfect.
right, real quick reminder. I will be putting out on politicalpistachio.com, douglasvgibbs.com, and my email, my exact itinerary when I go through the South during that week in October, when we may or may not be here for this. If you want to find out more or you want to participate or help out with creating one of the sites there in either the Texas, Dallas area, more than likely, Hendersonville, Tennessee, Lexington, Kentucky, Bentonville, Arkansas, or Colorado Springs, Colorado, email me, constitutionspeaker@yahoo.com, constitutionspeaker@yahoo.com. I finally caught up on that email last night, by the way. I'm up to date on it. So you should get a relatively quick response if you email that one. I'm still working on another email address I'm still behind on. But and if you want to participate in helping get it set up or finding a location, getting everything going, feel free to get a hold of me.
Real quick, Steve, somebody asked, what about foreign property, people who own property that are foreigners?
No, it was U.S. property.
What's that?
It's U.S. citizen, U.S. property. You have to be a citizen still to vote.
Okay, so
regardless. Citizenship's a requirement.
Now, here's a question. I don't want to go off on a tangent, but just answer a simple yes or no. In the original Constitution, could foreigners own property?
It doesn't say.
That's a state issue.
That would have been up to each state.
Okay.
But you needed to be a citizen to vote. So just being a property owner wasn't enough.
Okay. Good enough. All right, guys. On that note, we're gonna say good night. Hope y'all enjoyed it today, and we will see y'all next week.
Yeah, women's right to vote next week.